Paul Johnson for the approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reviewed the minutes as submitted electronically and find them in order and move for approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. First item on our agenda will be the community care generation connected discussion. And I'm going to call on Mayor Bill Ketchum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, if you will recall, we had some discussion about community care and the daycare facility, the $4 million daycare facility, and the questions were we need to find out some more information before we move forward, and we needed to find out, can community care, because in 1996, 99, Paul, you were on the board back then, I don't recall, but it was struggling, and I think we made community care, said let's make them a not-for-profit 501c3 to where they can stand on their own, and that was done. So fast forward into, does the 501c3 have the ability to borrow money? We were looking at borrowing money from the state pool, and we did find out from our attorney, Mr. Cope, that we can borrow money. The other options would be to either, but that would be on our own, and the rates would be higher because it would be with a private or public bank. Otherwise, we would come back and have to use through bonding, just put it all into one bonding issue with the schools or anything else when we go to the bond market for the $4 million, or we can go through that same pool, I guess, but it would be through the credit of the county, right? Either way on those last two, it's the because we own the land, we own the buildings. At the end of when the $4 million daycare facility is built, we will be responsible for the building and the upkeep of the building. But the Community Care Board wants to make the monthly payments towards the debt and set it up on 15-year to amortize it out and pay off the debt. So that's where we're at. Suggestions. Commissioner Dodd, I know you just came in and sat down, but we were talking about community care. We did find out that community care can borrow money, but it would be at a higher rate because it would be on the open market with a regular bank. So second option would be come back. We go through the same facility as we had the presentation from Kevin last week. I believe Marty Spears is here representing him. He's out sick. We can go through them, but our credit, the county's credit, would have to back that for community care, or we roll it into, this committee would make the motion to roll it into just the bonding. And did our bond market ever call back? I know it was referred to.
That's what I was looking back. Our
I'm sorry.
Lillian with Bassberry and Sims. I sent an email out this morning. That's what I was looking to see if I got anything back from Sam, because we were connecting Lillian with Evan Cope, looking at their charter and all that piece of it. So the question, I guess the question was, if we are borrowing it, we would still have to do the 20-day notice and all that through our regular process. The question was, if they borrow it, would they still have to do the 20-day notice because we were financially responsible?
Well,
but that's,
haven't we done a similar situation where we just bond it and just let entity like Community Care in this case just make payments to reduce the debt?
and that was the other thing. She was, that when we were talking, she was, of course, Lillian was having to dig down. just like the airport authority comes under different statutes, she thought that there was something for nursing homes that they, whether or not that they could borrow. This one, particularly a nonprofit, could borrow on the tax exempt market.
Gotcha.
Them themselves doing it, but
If
I
you-
don't believe that they would be able to borrow on their own better than we could.
Well, yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Good.
It's going to cost the community care more money.
Right, if the desire is to move that direction, that, we would just, commission's approval that they are going to finance the building of, enroll it into the, and pay for it in a future bond issue.
So,
But it still would need to be, all the lawyers would have to get in as far as those agreements between Rutherford County and Community Care, the entity that they are going to pay, all those things.
$4 million in what we're planning on going to market with this fall is not a lot.
Well, see, again, I'm not ready to go to the market this fall, because as you've got coming up,
We're okay.
is that the schools are doing their next thing, getting their bids on their schools in November. So if that was the situation and community care, then I would recommend we do an internal capital outlay note that we have done many times for this purpose to be taken out later with a bond issue.
With the bond issue.
We kind of just
And then
use-
repay ourselves.
Right. So then when we go to bond market, we just take out that capital outlay note that we borrowed from ourselves.
Yeah, if we went to the outside market, we couldn't, as ourself, we would have to go to an outside bank like a Pinnacle or something. Otherwise, if we went through, CCRC went through Marty's group, then JP Morgan would be the bank because it has to be a
But they won't
county or city.
lend, as he said last time, they won't lend to community care.
Not to community care, that's correct.
Right.
We could, Marty, I believe, we suspend the rules now, so Mr. Spears, please come up.
Come on up, Mr. Spears, please.
Doug, you're our finance chairman on the board. If you have any comments you want to make regarding that, could we go through your firm and still,
Community care, could community care go to?
Yes, they could.
Okay, so that's not,
That is correct. A revenue-only issuance, so the market or the rate would be higher than what you could borrow because, they're banking on revenue as the payback where you've got the GO debt of the county. Yeah.
So are we just looking for a decision tonight if we're going to do the financing on their behalf?
that,
that we're
Or-
going
or
to
let-
finance it, that we are going to borrow the money for it.
Right.
And then that arrangement come into place,
when you go to the bond market?
well, no, I'd say before.
Before you-
Before we, if we're going to, borrow from ourselves just till we go back to the market, which, not this summer, but probably fall, that, we'll just roll it. 4 million added to 100 and something million, it's not a lot. It's just,
Is there, Mr. Mayor, a memorandum of understanding or any kind of a contractual agreement that they're making the monthly payments?
Oh, I'm sure there would be. Doug, you got any, Mr. Finance Chairman, comments?
Come on up, Doug.
We would have an MOU to where the nursing home board would make the payments.
Yeah, what was agreed by the committee of over at Community Care was the recommendation was once, of course, the county would issue the debt being the county-owned building. At that point, the debt payment would come from Community Care, which, once we did the analysis of, as far as the need for daycare services, that once the revenue started coming in, of course, that would lead towards the, making the debt payment from those dedicated funds, from the revenue of the daycare. We have contingency funds in community care for during the construction phase, and of course, you know, they can do interest only and stuff during the construction phase while it's being built. That's pretty common. And at that point, once we have it up and running and we have the recurring revenue from the daycare, that would be a cost. We've discussed several different ways to keep down the operating costs of the daycare, knowing that debt payment's going to be an additional cost. As far as the utilization of the daycare, we had, like at the school board meeting just a few months ago, the school board actually was looking at the possibility of expanding a daycare at Riverdale High School, simply because there's been so many requests by our teachers, which is, once again, Riverdale's 2 miles down the road from community care, and they were actually looking at something over there for the teachers, you know, wanting some type of daycare. So my point being is, I believe from what we've done in analysis, there's going to be a need for this service. There's going to be, you know, a utilization of it, and of course that's going to bring the revenue that's not only for the operations but the debt payment for the building.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for these two gentlemen? Commissioner Allen?
Thank you. I have a question for Doug. Doug, did you put together the pro forma?
That was from, no ma'am, that was from our management company that we have out at Community Care that was building those financials. They had a CPA that was on staff that was working with their budget for their management as well.
Well, one of the questions that I had that just never quite clicked for me is, you know, initially when we were talking about this, I thought it was potentially going to include school-age children. So I was concerned about how we're going to get the kids to school, from school, and then I see here it says that that they're going to age out at age 5, so it's not going to be for school-age children, so we're not going to be concerned about transportation. Is that correct?
That's correct. Initially, just those little ones that we're looking for, because obviously once they get, one of the discussions was, of course, once they got to that point, there's other services for them. You know, they're going to go to school, and so this was looking at the need for just the younger, the infants, and through up until, you know, a lot of times you'll see them go to pre-K too. Of course, we just discussed it. Plainview, you know, they've got a pre-K program they just opened up in that area too. So we're not trying to compete with other things that's there. We're trying to meet a demand for that age group for daycare.
So back to that point, then one of the pieces that never made sense to me is we're accounting for revenue for after-school care.
Mm-hmm.
And so the revenue starts in year 1 at $70,000 and goes up to $142,000, almost $143,000. I don't know how we're generating after-school care if we're not taking in school-age children.
I'd have to check with, I'm sure she went over this. I don't recall what that was.
It's those kinds of details that just make me uncomfortable with the business model, the business plan, because even in the wages, we're showing the average wage is going to be $13.33 for an assistant. I don't think that number's going to hold true. In the loan amortization, they've got, you know, the interest rate at 1.94%. That's not going to hold true. I feel like all of these numbers need to be scrubbed and need to be a little bit tighter before we commit to this. Because as we talk about, and this is not for you so much, this is just for discussion, you know, we talk a lot about a wants versus a needs budget. This feels a lot like a want. I can see if it works, if the numbers work, that it could be a good possible recruiting and retention tool. But there's a whole lot of devil in the details that I feel like still haven't quite been hammered out. So that's why I asked if you were the person behind the numbers, that was going to influence my confidence in them a little bit.
No,
so that's why I asked.
I was busy with another budget, but no, ma'am.
Are there any more questions for these two gentlemen? We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so, I guess what is the will of this committee? Ms. Allen, did you get all of your concerns straight, or are you thinking that this might need to go back to iron out some of the details that you're concerned about, or are we ready to proceed forward?
The information in terms of the business model that's in front of us doesn't support the answers we've been given here for these questions. So it's really up to this body, if someone else, if they feel like they can support it, I'm not going to hold it up from going to a vote. I can't support it in its current form.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I served 6.5 years on the Community Care Board, and I see the need for this, and the only decision we need to make right now is what is the most conservative, fiscally responsible way to go ahead and pursue this, because it's a win situation for the employees out there and the county itself, and this is just another service that we can provide for the whole population of Rutherford County, because that's a tremendous, with 2 exclamation points, tremendous service to the citizens of this county, and I fully support it.
Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does anyone know if the incoming mayoral candidates or other commissioners have any ideas about this project? But
I'm not aware.
I just feel like here for the last little bit of this term, I'm not sure that I want to pursue this if the incoming administration, whoever that is, doesn't want us to do it, or if the new commission doesn't want it. I just don't understand why we couldn't let them decide this in September or October if it's something that they would like to proceed with.
Well, I don't think it's, this is community care. We have identified that we could borrow the money ourselves and go to an outside service. And I think that I'm just, as a member of that board, following through on what that board has requested. They've already gone through the engineering, conceptual plans, et cetera, with the architect firm, Johnson Bailey. It was Johnson Bailey that they have been working on this for, Doug, what, 2-3 years? So this is not a political thing. This is something the board is requesting that they want. They feel the need to provide affordable daycare because we own the property. The county does. They want to provide affordable daycare to all of our county employees, especially 24/7. It'd be the first 24/7 daycare facility in the state for a second, third shift, like Sheriff's Department, EMS, the EMA, Fire Rescue. Sometimes they work a second or third shift and have no place to take their young children, so they stay at home and don't work. So this would give them an opportunity to come back to work. So it's not a political issue about the next group. The board could probably meet this coming month and say, okay, if the county doesn't want to help us, but the county's still going to get the building at the end of they're going to take responsibility of the building after it's built. So I don't know why we're trying to make it political. It's, I really shouldn't care because I'm not going to be here in 60 days, but I do care because that's what the board wants.
Okay, is there any more discussion? Do we have a motion? Commissioner Johnson?
Motion to move forward with it.
We have a motion on the floor to move forward with this project. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Piercy. We'll open it back up for more discussion. Commissioner
And
Dodd?
forgive me, I had a circumstance arise that I had to address. Is the motion to proceed, which entity would borrow the money? If you beg tolerance here, are you declaring where we would borrow the money, or just that we are going to proceed and fund it internally and go to the bond market later?
I think the conversation was that we need to proceed in the most conservative, fiscally responsible way to do it, and only the timid survive sometimes. Commissioner Stevens, you need to take the bull by the horns and not worry about what the new commissioners are going to be thinking, because they're going to be depending on the expertise and the experience from the sitting commissioners now, surely to Pete, they're going to be receptive to what our suggestions and what our recommendations are, because, this is not our first rodeo. So, I don't know what your qualms are, but I'm not concerned about the support from the new commissioners that's coming in, because they're going to have to have some guidance and some mentoring from us, and they're going to have to accept our recommendations until they get their feet on the ground and want to make their mark. That's all I can say.
I talked to Ms. Nolan, and I think by August we could go back, talk to the accountants, make them redo the numbers, and come back at the August meeting prior to the full commission meeting and have those numbers together. But the motion here tonight would be to proceed ahead and start getting those numbers, and then you still have the opportunity to turn it down if the numbers don't make sense.
And just as far as the financing, Lisa, do you need clarification on his motion?
So for me, to move forward would be for that, and then I would start gathering the data and stuff, documents to borrow from ourselves.
Talk to the state, et cetera.
Because to do that, we have to get their approval too.
And so to borrow from ourselves would be in your motion. Any other discussion? If not, Mark, would you mind calling the roll?
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
No.
Commissioner Allen,
No.
Commissioner Gooch.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3, or 4-2.
Thank you. The resolution is adopted.
Internally, just internally provide cash, and they could start the project if they, when everybody approves that, and then we just roll it into our next borrowing.
If that doesn't work come August, Marty, we'll call you.
Okay, that's fine. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here this evening. General purpose school fund budget amendment. I see Mr. Broderick. Is that Mr. Sullivan up there?
Mr. Sullivan's not here. It's just Brian Runyon.
I couldn't see the lights.
We got, Mr. Sullivan was not able to make it tonight. I've got with me Brian Runyon. He'll be taking my position July 1. So he just I was wanting him to come up to meet Health and Ed last night, and of course the Budget Committee tonight. And if you folks are okay with it, I'll let him take you through the budget amendments, and I've got the detail in case you got any questions. But
Brian Runyon. Yep. Good evening. The first budget amendment we've got is the final year cleanup amendment budget for the general purpose school fund for items such as leave payouts, increases for degree and certification pay scale changes, additional costs for contracted services such as Rutherford Academy, as well as growth routes and fuel surcharges for contract buses due to the dramatic increase in fuel prices this fiscal year. Funding for these expenses to come from a portion of local revenue collected over budgeted amounts. The recommended motion is to amend Fund 141 for the final cleanup of expenditure line items for the fiscal year 21-22 for a net increase of $1,908,228 in budgeted expenditures. This amount is equivalent to less than 0.5% of the amended expenditure budget.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mark, you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch.
Yes. The resolution is adopted. Centralized cafeteria fund budget amendment.
Okay, this centralized cafeteria fund FY 21-22 amendment is a final cleanup of amendment to allocate for the second $1,000 additional duty bonus for the food service fund employees that was approved for a full-time for all full-time BOE employees recently, as well as adjusting non-payroll line items due to higher costs for equipment replacement and supplies. The recommended motion is to approve the FY 21-22 Fund 143 budget amendments of $271,000 increase in both current year revenues and expenditures for the final cleanup amendment of the centralized cafeteria fund.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Todd, any discussion? If not, Mark, recall the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. Resolution is adopted. Educational Capital Projects Fund Budget Amendment.
Okay, we have two budget amendments for the educational capital project. The first one is just for the capital projects, where we're just moving in between lines. This cleanup of the capital project amendment requests funds to be moved from approved capital projects that have been completed or nearing completion to other already approved capital projects that need additional funding due to increased construction and material costs. The one new project is an emergency roof repair at Laverne Middle School that complied with BOE emergency purchasing policy. This cleanup amendment requests no additional revenue above the amount already provided in the current annual budget. Recommended motion to approve the cleanup of capital project amendment as presented in detail. Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
We can take both of them at the same time.
Okay, the second budget amendment is in Fund 177, which provides funding for an already approved emergency replacement of a chiller of $350,000, as well as $200,000 for additional new classroom and administrative office setups for growth in several RCS schools. Recommended motion to approve the final cleanup amendment for FY 21-22 for Fund 177 as presented.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Johnson, any discussion?
Is this being moved out of 335, or is it just within 335 and and capital or school projects are the only thing that's moving, really? It's just 335, it's just changing. Yeah, okay. So we're not actually doing a budget amendment, it's just transferring between projects.
For the one, yes.
Yes.
For the other one.
In the second one, yeah.
The
yeah.
second one's from committee.
Right.
Part of it.
Okay. That's it.
If there's no more questions or comments, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. The resolution is adopted. Funding for high school additions.
Mr. Chairman, so last night, Mr. Lee presented the Health and Education Committee with updated numbers. We'd asked him for that the month prior. The numbers that he'd given us initially on the renovation or the additions for the high schools was about 9 months old. And so we had several members of that committee that wanted to know what would the numbers be today if we were to authorize these today, because there's a great concern that if we continue to wait too long, as we're adding 1,000 kids a year, we're just getting further and further behind. So anyway, the updated numbers he gave us were $315 a square foot, and so Health and Education Committee last night voted to advance the top 3 projects for approval based on estimates. So the estimate is $136 million, and that's a total for Riverdale, Oakland, and Smyrna. Again, the firm bids will not be in until November. It will be the next commission's responsibility to determine what they're going to pay for and how they're going to pay for it in terms of when the actual numbers come in, because I don't know that we'll be able to get 3 projects done for the $136 million. We just don't know what those numbers are yet. But there was a lot of momentum and a lot of concern on the part of Health and Ed that we continue to move those projects forward. So they asked for us to advance that tonight. So when Board of Education, when they made their report last night, they did not come to us with an ask. The committees on that, the members on that committee took it upon themselves to go ahead and advance the project. So that's the reason you don't have any handouts or any information in front of you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, what was that total? 137.2?
It was 136 million.
Okay, what's the time frame on this?
They'd like them to be open December 24. That's the time frame.
For all 5?
The top three.
For 3?
Yeah.
For $137 million?
Yes, and that's the estimate. We won't know, they won't get firm bids in until November. And so that's the reason I want to make that caveat to say this authorization was made based off of an estimate.
Lisa, did you have a
No, just a comment, because we did kind of talk about that. So, I mean, we've built in, at these numbers, not enough, but we have built in, what, 2.8 million in interest for next year. If it's more than, obviously, around this number, then we probably won't have enough, but we'll just amend it when we know and when the approval comes in.
Mr. Chairman, I got a
Yes.
question for the finance director. How are we going to carry $137 million?
Well, that's what I did real quick. So total debt service for that estimated, and I'm using 75,000, that ends up to be 10.2 million in debt service for a full year. So it's roundabout. Right, it'd be, depending on when we borrow it, about a half a year. So we've got 2.8 built in.
So is the question before us, do we want to proceed with estimates or wait until we have more firm numbers? Is that the question before us, Commissioner Allen?
It is, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson, do you have anything else?
So based on the wishes of the committee, I will make the motion that we authorize the additions based on the estimate of $136 million, and that would fund Riverdale, Smyrna, and Oakland. We did add in that motion last night the caveat that these are not firm numbers, and we will not know what the true commitment or cost of these projects are going to be until those bids come in. So that is the motion that was made last night.
We have a motion from Commissioner Allen. Is there a second?
So is the motion, I'm sorry,
Well, let's get a second. Well, go ahead if you need to clarify.
the motion is to authorize up to $135 million, or whatever, $136 million for funding of additions to 3 schools to be borrowed in
At future borrowing.
but you're authorizing up to
Yes,
$135 million.
that's correct.
Okay, is there a second?
So if it's more, we're just gonna quit when we get to 137 million, or,
Well, we could
Move
always
forward.
relook at it, I suppose.
pardon?
We could always go back and relook at it. In other words, if we approve up to 136 and it comes up to 140, then we'll have to make another vote.
What if it's 240? Talking about 9 months on the $137 million, that could fluctuate a whole lot.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment? So nobody's talking about turning shovels yet. Shovels won't turn until the bids are in. So when you get the bids in, that's when you'll decide how much is it going to cost to do 3 projects. We might decide at that point we only have enough money to do 2 projects to keep it under that $136 million. So you're not going to start 3 projects not knowing what they're going to cost.
You already give the projected finish date.
I thought he was asking for what was their goal for opening it. That's the goal for opening it, but that's based off of not getting bids in until November, because it'll take roughly a year to get those built.
I'm going to stop the discussion until we get a second.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second? The motion is denied due to a lack of a second, and we can continue discussion at this time, Mr. Allen, if you.
I simply conveyed the wishes of the Health and Education Committee from last night. Like I said, the Board of Education did not come to us with an ask last night. So I'm sure we'll probably discuss this again on Monday, I would expect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it to the Budget Committee. Any other discussion or questions on that issue? If not, we will. I just want to say something. Go ahead, Doug. Appreciate it. Yeah.
I just want to say, with leaving, I just wanted to say that I sincerely appreciate the work, of this of this budget committee and the Health and Ed committee over the last few years I've been here, especially through COVID. We went through some really strange times on the finance side, and I've always appreciated this county commission working with me, Mr. Spurlock, when we needed to move money or have just some very strange requests because of the operations with COVID. So thank you all for your support.
Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say one thing. Thank you, Doug, for your services and your candor with this group and the Board of Education, and you did a fantastic job, and you got some big shoes to fill, but it's like I told you a while ago, he's only a phone call away, and I know you can handle it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Runyon. Doug? Next on our agenda is the application for the Hazardous Mitigation Grant for Emergency Management. Lisa?
Yes, they are requesting approval to apply for a hazard mitigation grant in the amount of $331,980, county match of $36,887. They want to use the money to purchase and install a generator at Lane Agri Park, since the Lane Agri Park is identified as a continuity of operations plan for the county. Request to apply.
Okay, you've heard the request. Is there a motion? Commissioner Johnson?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Second, Commissioner Piercy. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, if no discussion, we'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Resolution is adopted. State Litter Grant for Correctional Work Center. I see Mr. Cope.
Be a shame if we went a whole meeting and didn't talk about trash, so we'll bring it up here. There's actually two, Chairman, and one of them is our grant contract and the other is an actual litter contract. Do we want to do both of these together or separately?
We can.
Okay. The first one is going to be the grant that we get every year for the litter removal on the county roads. And the second one is a contract that we work with the state Department of Transportation on to pick up the state routes. The only difference this year in the actual contract is the fact that they were able to get some money from the governor, and they're going to be doing the interstates from here on out. We've been doing them for the past couple years. And then they are, even though they're going to be taking that from us, they're going to be adding $10 per mile for the state routes. So last year it was 83,000. This year it's going to be 70,000. And without the headache of cleaning up the interstates.
Is this grant in contract similar to what we've had in the past?
Yes, sir. It's the same we have every year.
Okay, you've heard the request. Is there a motion? Commissioner Piercy, is there a second? Commissioner Dodd, any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. The resolution is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Cope. Appreciate you. Financial assurance in lieu of bond document for landfill.
Bishop not hanging around for that? I guess. I thought he was here. Did he not hang around for those items?
We can pass over it, or Lisa, can you take it?
Yes, and it's something that we do every year.
Lisa, can you pull your mic up?
Sorry. This is the 2022 annual inflation adjustment of the financial assurance for the Rutherford County landfill. It changes every year, generally a decrease, and the second page of the document shows the adjustment and what our total required amount of financial obligation is. 750 there's two different parts. They broke it apart several years ago instead of one. Isn't that right?
Last year, they split out the demolition landfill with sanitary landfill. Demolition landfill, since it is still open, is increasing because we're not depreciating that yet. The sanitation landfill is decreasing by $75,000, but same documentation that we've had every year for several years.
Okay, you've heard the request. Commissioner Dodd?
We heard this in solid waste just prior to this meeting. I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Dodd, second, Commissioner Piercy. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. Resolution is adopted. Application for State Reentry Program Grant for Recovery Court.
I'll take this
Ellen.
one. Yes. It's application permission to apply for the additional funding. And Lindsay has got a summary of what this is, what it will be used for. The reentry program under Recovery Courts is requesting permission to apply for additional funding through the State of Tennessee Office of Criminal Justice Programs on the current evidence-based jail programming contract with Rutherford County Adult Detention Center. With the additional funding, they plan to implement vocational, employment, life skill, and transitional services at the Rutherford County Adult Detention Center. The additional funding will allow for supplementary services to be implemented at the Rutherford County Correctional Work Center. The budget for the project is currently being developed by the Reentry Program Coordinator, the Jail Administrator, Deputy Chief, and the Work Center Superintendent. They are seeking permission to apply to the maximum up to $1 million over the duration of 3 years, and there should not be a county match to the funding.
Okay, you've heard the request. Commissioner Johnson?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Johnson. Is there a second? Commissioner Allen, any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. Resolution is adopted. Health Department contract. Ms. Nolan, do you have that one also? Or?
This is the annual contract with the Health Department with the state, and the commitment for them on the contract is $3,061,310. They're ahead of the game, getting it ahead of next year. But typically, after we adopt the budget, if there's changes in personnel or raises, they may have to go back to amend it, but this is their starting point.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion approved by Commissioner Allen, second by Commissioner Dodd. Are there any discussion? If not, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes, the resolution is adopted. The 2021-22 budget amendments as necessary. First, we have a solid waste fund budget transfer.
I'll do that
Ms.
one, yes,
Nolan?
sir. And this is a request to move $35,000 out of the contracts with private agencies to the disposal fees. And this is just to make sure that there's sufficient funds in the line to pay the bills for the recycling of the tires.
You've heard the request.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Piercy, is there a second? Commissioner Dodd, any discussion? If not, we'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. Resolution is adopted. General fund and other special revenue fund budget amendments.
Okay, these next three documents are they're related and recognizing revenue coming in, or estimating the revenues coming in for the second tranche of the, from the ARPA money, and recognizing that the revenue loss that we calculated for fiscal year 20 and for 21, a total of $23,794,23. So this amends the general fund budget, recognizing the transfer in. The second document is in the Fund 127, the special revenue fund that accounts for the funds, recognizing the $32,271,233 is what our second tranche should be, with $23,794,23 being transferred out, the balance just going into the fund balance to be deferred later. And then the last document is showing you that it has been submitted.
You've heard the request. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Johnson, is there a second? Commissioner Allen, any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. Motion is adopted. Payroll budget transfer for various departments.
Skip one, there's general
Two.
capital project.
So this is after we,
Working it. The general capital projects, were you going to work on that one, or your payroll, was it?
Did I skip one?
oh, I skipped that one. The General Capital Projects Fund Budget Amendment.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
That's C. Okay, so I don't have anything in your documents. I'm going to have something for you at the end for next time. Okay, so you know along the way, and you're used to those that are on school, on the school committee, and for, well, on this committee, when I send you the general capital projects, on how we account for those projects. I do it on a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and we keep up with all of it, and it spreads over several years. The auditors want us to put a budget into the books and records, so I'm going to have to back into that and set an amendment, budget amendment that will go into the records, into the accounting records. I don't have that for you yet. You've already done it. I just have to develop the amendment. It'll look a little different because there are several projects under, like general capital projects, public safety, and public health, and there's several different projects below those, but it will be wrapped up into one to satisfy our auditors. So that will be coming. I don't have it for you now, but it will just be a reflection of what you've already approved for those projects.
So you don't need any action from us tonight?
I just don't want y'all to be surprised when we put it on there. And like I said, it's just going to be a reflection of what you have already approved and what you've already seen date to date. You'll only see what we've expended to date, and what that plus the cash we have available is what is our amendment going to be. Not from the beginning of the project, which might have been a couple years ago.
And that will be a 100% fund balance funded budget
Right.
amendment.
Right.
Because all the cash has already come in, there's no more revenue to come in to those funds.
It'll say fund balance project.
Okay, any questions on that issue? If not, then we'll go to the payroll budget transfer.
Yes, sir. Okay, so after we finished our payroll today, we had folks look at all the accounts to make sure if we don't want to end the year with any salary line item overdrawn. So a lot of these are just, we've got money within it. The first one is moving money from maintenance personnel to custodial personnel. This is for payout for folks that retiring. Finance is just, we had 3 meetings this time for our audit committee that fell in this fiscal year, and adding about 1,000 for overtime to get us through the end of the year. Sheriff is needs about $2,600 in their assistant line, and we had sufficient funds in youth services officers for that. Jail needs $30,000 estimating for overtime for the finish of the year. There's money in guards for it, so we're moving that. In juvenile detention, the same thing, 13,000 for overtime coming from attendance. Drug court, moving 6,030 from other salary and wages into the to the director position. And then health department, moving 4,250 from part-time into other salary and wages. So these are all transfers within, but keeps our books clean.
Okay, you've heard the request. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Dodd, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Johnson, any discussion? If not, we'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. Resolution is adopted. The final budget review, there's 2 items here, and then after that, we'll kind of open the floor up if there's any questions or comments. So it ended up on our agenda, the deputy to the mayor title and salary. And I'm just wondering if this should be actually coming from steering. Commissioner Johnson?
My thoughts on this is, I don't think it needs to be reduced or whatever. I think the new incoming mayor should have the leeway. It's already been in the budget. I think the new mayor should have the leeway to hire who he wants, and he's going to have to pay for it, you know. So I don't think we need to address that.
Okay, so as is, his, or whoever the person is, salary would remain the same, no changes. Okay. As far as the title, Commissioner Stevens, did you have something?
I was just going to recommend that we send this to the steering committee in August, and then we can just review the job description and look at the title there and make the decision in August.
Okay, so we have a motion to send this to steering for a title recommendation. Is that pretty much it, Commissioner Stevens? Is there a second?
I'll make a second. I would like to expand that just based on our conversation the other night that it was also job description. We were going to tighten up the job description and the title.
Okay, cool. And that's part of your motion? Okay. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye. Opposed? The resolution is adopted, and we'll send that back to steering for their August meeting. Is that correct? Okay. Ms. Nolan, do you have information on the
Yes.
program salary?
Yes. With the Gov 20 monies, a mechatronics program was established at the Correctional Work Center. We've been paying the instructor with those funds. Since we moved the majority, well, all the money out of Gov 20 to fund the Goldstein's building, so when I looked at that again, I thought that line needs to totally come out of our capital projects and move into the workhouse budget so that they can pay that directly and not be out of the grant funds anymore. So I would, from,
I had a total of $20,800 per year. Is that?
well, that's, I was going to say 20,000, we're close. What we spent from May 1st of 21 to 6/22/22, we've spent less than 18.
Yeah, we're doing $50 per hour, 8 hours per week. It'd be $400 per month and 52 weeks, $20,800.
Yeah,
No insurance, no benefits.
right, it's just a contract.
It's just a contract labor for him. He works at the General Motors plant in Spring Hill and comes and teaches the inmates that program, mechatronics.
So I would recommend, if we're going to continue that program, it's an operating expense, that it really needs to be part of the workhouse budget. So I would respectfully request that $20,800 be added to the workhouse budget for this purpose.
Now, Ms. Nolan is respectfully asking for a motion, so can we respect her with a motion? Commissioner Allen?
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second? Respectfully. Commissioner Dodd? Any other discussion? If not, let's call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Respectfully.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes, and that resolution is adopted. Before we get to the tax,
One more.
okay, yeah, I was going to say, before we get to the tax levy and the appropriation, are there any more issues or topics that we want to bring up for the final review? And we'll call on Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question about when we will get our opioid funds to come in. Do we know when those will be here?
Okay, so your question is, when will we start receiving the opioid funds?
Correct.
Do y'all have an answer with that, or?
Or we were talking.
When will we start getting the opioid settlement funds in?
If they work it like they did the tobacco settlement, it comes in.
I got an email from one of the attorneys, and they said that they should start coming in by the end of next month.
The allocation,
Allocation from the state.
Well, my question is, we've got a line item that we have now in our budget for billboards and programs and so forth, and I wondered if, since we're getting opioid money, do we need two different funds doing the same thing? Can we eliminate the fund that we have now and let the board use the money at their discretion later, so we don't have two different funds doing the same thing?
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking that similarly, is that account is the one we could use to account for the money.
Well, if they're getting the money in, can we back out what we've already put in if we don't?
Or you ultimately will probably, I'm assuming we're going to get more than 25,000? That
Well,
you,
I heard it was like 86,000, I can't remember.
85 or 86,000.
so I'm saying that 25,000 to start with, and you would up it to the 86, and that becomes the funding source. So, but I'm saying the same thing you're saying.
Well, can we just back the 25 out and use
Yes.
the money from the opioid settlement to fund that? Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we eliminate the 25,000 in that fund and put that back in unassigned fund balance.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, because we're not eliminating the expense, we're just paying for it differently. Okay. Yes, second.
Really not doing anything. Or are you going to increase revenue by 25,000 for opioid? So, I mean, if you're going to leave the expense in, it's still the expense. It's just you're going to have additional revenues in the future coming to pay for it, as opposed to property tax revenue or sales tax revenue or anything like that. So is it necessary to reduce the expenditure? I think is what your motion was, right?
I just want the 25,000 that we've allocated to be put back in the unassigned fund balance if there's going to be another source that funds the expenses.
So what I'm hearing is we take out the 25 and then we amend the whole, whatever comes in that.
At a later date.
That committee's decision on how it will be allocated.
Correct, because going forward, we don't need to put money in if we're getting money from somewhere else.
Okay.
We can take it out and then y'all can amend it back later.
Would that change, how would that change the budget, if all, Ms. Nolan?
As we sit today, because we don't have revenue coming in from the
I'll have a source of
bid.
revenue.
Yes.
Would it reduce some expenditures by
expenses.
$25,000?
Okay, so that's my question, because if we've committed to billboard contracts and things like that, we don't need to disrupt existing commitments for that money by doing this prematurely.
And what was the $25,000 dedicated for?
I
There were
think they
program
just,
materials and,
materials, I think there was a
pamphlet or something, a
Lori,
trifold
Yeah,
was sent out.
Flippo, she said that they are, maybe, I forgot, no, it was, over at,
Alyssa?
Alyssa had IT put together and design a mail piece, and it was mailed to a targeted segment of the population of, they could identify families who had teenagers between the ages of 10 and 18, I think is what they were trying to target, hoping that that mail piece would be laying on the kitchen counter and talk about how bad fentanyl is.
So, I'm sorry.
And the billboards, and I'm not sure what the obligation is.
I
on
don't know
those
if there's a
billboards.
contract
I
for
think it's a
billboards.
monthly, do we pay
So
monthly?
we paid half of it. We paid half of it, and he had about half of it left at the end of the year, and that's what they decided to use to do that trifold thing.
Gotcha.
Commissioner Dodd, did you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. I just don't want to inadvertently disrupt the previous action. I'm saying the same thing again. I don't want to disrupt the previous action of commitment, whether they're under contract or not.
So what I could hear, I mean, I wouldn't change anything for 25,000, but is that you would want to use, you're telling this committee, use that first 25,000 for this purpose. I mean, that's kind of the same thing. Or it's when you said 80,000 can be used whatever, and you still do the 25. I think what you're saying, you wanted the 80,000 to not duplicate. You didn't want to do 80 plus the 25, right? So either we say the first 25 is dedicated to the purpose that it has been used, and then you have the remaining for the committee to do whatever, or you take this out and let the committee decide how all the 80 is. Or thirdly, you give the committee 80, and then the county is going to fund 25.
I understood the motion was to let the opioid funds support all opioid education, prevention. We're trying to take property tax dollars, any other dollars out of this fund. So if we're not disrupting the program, if we're not faulting on a contract for a billboard, or I just want to make sure there's no unintended consequences to doing this without knowing all the answers. So if all the obligations have been met and this is new money for a new program, new year, then I'm perfectly fine taking it out, knowing that we're going to be getting 80,000. Because I don't want to handcuff that committee. I want them to be able to decide how they want to spend that money.
So reduce it out and let the committee come back with their recommendation.
When did you say did you give an answer to when you thought that the money might actually come? Did we have any?
The email I received from our attorneys this week said we should be getting it in by the end of next month. As long as we don't have a bill that hits between now and...
Well, if we get the bill now, I mean, it would be an obligation of this year, and that contracts and POs and issues are not until next fiscal year. You're in August anyway when we start opening.
You're saying we should get the funds by end of July or August?
End of July is when we should get the funds. That's what I was notified of. But
Okay.
And then the committee can
it's the
get
state now.
together.
But your motion is go ahead and take 25,000 out and put it back in the ending fund balance
Of this year's budget.
of
or
this year's.
Proposed next year's,
In the upcoming year's budget,
22, 23.
correct.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I might make a comment, which I'm going to anyway, I think it'd be logical for you to withdraw your motion to keep from muddying up the water. That's just my thoughts.
My thoughts on that is, I mean, this is just coming up. I would like to, I guess, hear from that committee prior to making any changes, but that's just one commissioner's thoughts. Is there any other discussion or questions? Does everyone understand the motion? Let's call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Piercy?
No.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
No.
Motion fails, 2-4.
Okay, the resolution is denied. Ms. Nolan?
So you may want to speak to what purchasing approved yesterday on the contract for cleaning. Or Mayor, the only thing I want to bring is if that is what is coming forward, I need to adjust the budget for building maintenance to make sure that there's money for contracted services. I will keep the bottom line number the same, and any differences I would recommend, I'm just going to add it to building improvement within that line. But I just need to get the money into the correct line.
Mr. Dodd's not here, but they did put it out to purchasing. Commissioner Johnson was there. Put it out to bid to look for a housekeeping maintenance type service to come in, because he's understaffed. He can't get people. We don't pay enough for the part-time folks. We've bumped them every year, 25, 50 cents an hour, et cetera, and we're still can't get enough to manage all the buildings. Just the judicial building in itself is a beast of a building to try to maintain. So they put it out to bid. They had two companies. Actually, both companies came in and beat the statewide bid, who was with JLL. The one company that got the bid is located, I believe, here in Murfreesboro or Lebanon. And so I think that they will furnish all their cleaning materials, all their disinfectants, paper towels, toilet paper, et cetera, and they'll have two floaters that will be able to, in the event somebody comes out of one of the courtrooms, has an accident, then they don't have enough people. That floater will have to go and clean it up. Sometimes there's blood spilled, et cetera. In some cases, if they fall, get hurt, they'll take care of all that. A little bit more, I think, than what we're paying right now for the part-time people and full-time and benefits.
Well, I think there's sufficient funds, in talking with Adam, that there's sufficient funds that we budgeted in, that I just need to move it into the
You just
correct
need to
line
move it in.
item.
So that's what she's,
That's
okay.
just, the bottom line number will not change. I just want to, for
Have
those
the
that,
authority to
for
change it.
those that tick and tie what we presented to what we will have in the budget, that will be a change.
And you need that action this evening?
I'm letting y'all know.
It's just FYI.
Right,
Okay.
because I think that purchasing did approve it
last night.
Yes.
last night.
Yeah.
So I'm just informing, I need to move some lines. The bottom line won't change. The appropriation resolution won't have to change. I'll just have to internally do some shifting of where the money is allocated to get in the right account number.
Okay, are there any questions for us at this time? Commissioner Allen?
Thank you. And it's not about this particular topic. It was actually about solid waste. We had talked about, when we accounted for the money on the lost revenue, that was potentially going to be some of the money that we were going to utilize to begin to bank some dollars for solid waste. Refresh my memory on where we left that conversation.
That it's available.
Okay, so we're going to leave it in
General fund.
General fund. We're not going to earmark it.
Yes.
Okay.
Once it comes into general fund, you can move it. If you start putting it and restricting it into different funds, you can't go the other way. So your most flexible position is to keep it in the general fund and have it ready to move whenever you need it, to wherever you need it.
This committee knows that, and this committee's familiar with that conversation. We probably need to make very clear to everybody else that that money's available and that's potentially what it should be used for or should be thought about as a funding source. I'm just concerned.
So the next step, because the way I'm showing it is going into unassigned, the one step up is to commit and say, you would tell me, Lisa, of that 23 million, I want you to commit X amount of dollars for solid waste. All that is a resolution of this body that tells us that. It can be easily undone.
It's not moving, it's just committing.
It's
Going on record, gotcha.
going on record and commit, yeah. I mean, you can do that anytime. It's easy to do, it's easy to undo.
Anything else on the final review, Commissioner Stevens?
Piggybacking on that, what was the cost for purchasing that metal cover and the trucks and so forth we need? Was it $1.7 million?
I believe
If we had to do
I believe it
that,
was $750,000, if I remember right. There was $150,000 for the cover, and I think it was $600,000 for the equipment for a year. $50,000 a month for 12 months, $600,000, and then $150,000 for the cover.
So if we committed-
$750,000 for just to cover the trash while it's being stored before it gets hauled on top of the ground, and then the equipment to move that and load it into trucks is what Mr. Cush said.
so if we committed $1 million of this, then we would have the money set aside if we needed it for this emergency.
That's what you're telling me, to commit $1 million of it for public health.
Well, I'll make a
That
motion.
wouldn't cover, I'm sorry, that wouldn't cover any tipping fees or hauling fees or anything. That would just be for the storing of the trash until it gets hauled. So I think he said, I want to say $63 a ton for tipping fees and hauling fees is what he had. And then on top of that, how many ever tons of trash we have. So,
I was thinking we were talking like 4 or 5 million total.
yeah, in total, you're looking at several $1 million for hauling and tipping fees, but just the cover and the equipment to move the trash around while it's still in this county was just the $750,000.
Well, knowing that this issue is looming out there, I think we would be very wise to go ahead and commit some of that money. So I will make a motion that we commit $5 million of the
That we just did.
the lost, is it the lost revenue, or is it in the unassigned fund balance now?
I guess what I would like to hear is that instead of all of it going to unassigned with the amendment that we just did, is to change it and take 5 of it and make it committed for public health.
So a motion to amend what
one.
the previous motion to commit $5 million of that lost revenue for solid waste.
Yeah.
That's my motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
We've had, I'm so glad y'all brought that up. It's been in solid waste. It's just a stopgap plan B if something occurs. And Mr. Johnson may not have been involved in all that, but some of the commissioners on Public Works had done just some good, solid, simple math. How many tons? How far are we taking it? Got some prices on loading it. Got a price to cover it, and got a price for a close tipping fee. So I'm going to be supporting this, Paul. I think you're just may not be up to speed on all the efforts that have gone on before. Would you agree with what I just said, Steve?
So you're comfortable with this?
And we're earmarking it. We're committing, if everything just tools along at Republic, we will not touch this. It's an emergency fund.
Well, Mr. Piercy, I believe you said you're comfortable with it too?
Yes, sir, very much so. It'll cover us. It'll build the roof. It'll furnish the equipment to put the trash back over into transfer trucks, and it should cover the station if we have to go that direction for at least a year, and then good safety net.
Commissioner Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Knowing that this is out there, I think the worst thing that we can possibly do for the next commission and the next mayor is to not make any provision for this Plan B. And then an emergency happens and they have no plan on how to move forward. So I think we have a responsibility to them, since we have this money available, to set it aside, commit it, just in case something does go haywire, and they won't be scrambling to come up with their plan. So,
And I heard you say put it in solid waste, and you said something about public health. Where is exactly going,
well,
I guess?
It's going to be, solid waste stuff is considered public health.
Okay,
So
so
it will
it's-
be a commitment for, instead of committed for public safety, it's going to be committed for public health
In the general fund.
in the general fund.
Right.
Any other discussion, Commissioner Johnson?
Well, I'm comfortable with their recommendation. That's what we depend on the committees for, so I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, no other questions? We'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes, resolution is adopted, and thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Stevens. Anything else under final review before we get to item 15 and 16? If not, Ms. Nolan, we're on the tax levy resolution.
Yes, I won't go through all of this. Y'all have been through this so many times, but it's the same resolution on how we allocate funds. Certified tax rate at $1.6162. We really have not made any changes on how we allocate money to funds, and that's what this resolution is for.
Okay, need a motion to approve the tax levy.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Johnson, is there a second? Commissioner Piercy, any further discussions or clarifications? Not, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. So this resolution will be forwarded to the full commission, which will be Monday at
Monday,
9 o'clock in the morning. Okay. The appropriation resolution,
The only change that we would have would be to the workhouse budget to add $20,800.
For the
And
megatrons.
remove the alcohol and drug programs,
Oh,
25,000.
No, that failed.
Oh, I'm sorry, that did, sorry.
okay, so we need a motion to approve the appropriations resolution.
So moved.
Commissioner Johnson, is there a second? Commissioner Dodd, any other discussion? If not, we'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. So this resolution will be forwarded to the full commission Monday at 9 a.m. Other business, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. In talking with Commissioner McAdoo, of course, property management meets tomorrow night. We'd like to make a request, and it'll go through property management tomorrow night, but just to inform the committee, we're going to request $30,000 out of Gov 21. We still have a little bit of funds left out of Gov 21. You know, we depleted Gov 20 for all the money going to Goldstein's, which was 292.
291 plus 25 plus 10.
Yeah. So that money went over for the architectural and engineering design for remodeling of the Goldstein's building. Still have a little bit left in Gov 21, and what we'd like to do, we were waiting to get down to the end. We never completed the third floor, the 2 rooms up here, where GIS and IT was located, and the third one over here where Darren was located. Our plans are right now is to go in, remodel, put in ceiling tiles, blinds to match the outside of what the rest of them look like, new carpet. I forgot what else. Some lights. I think in those 3 rooms, Adam says 30,000 should cover it. They'll do they'll do all the labor themselves. The carpet is had to order it because it takes 2 months to get it, but that will complete. A lot of those ceiling tiles were damaged when we had the roof that leaked. We got the new roof put on 2 years ago. Never went back and replaced all that. So that's what this 30,000 will go to. It'll come before the Property Management Committee tomorrow night and request that. Just want to let you know.
If they will approve it, then we'll put
If
it in
you'll
there.
approve it tonight, the 30K, then we'll get approval from Property Management tomorrow night, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You've heard the request. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Johnson, is there a second?
Second, and I'll look forward to hearing it at Property Management on behalf of this body tomorrow.
Thank you, Commissioner Dodd. Any discussion? If not, we'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes. That resolution will be sent to Property Management, which is tomorrow evening.
Tomorrow night.
Okay. Anything else before the committee?
Oh, we are going to move Lisa upstairs as soon as we get the carpet in.
Well, on behalf of Chairman P., just want to let you know that I think the process went very smoothly. We had some lively debates. Everyone was professional, and I know he appreciates that. We appreciate the staff and the time that they put into everything, the mayor and all involved, the department heads. So once again, I think we had a very great budget process, and so on behalf of Chairman P., I want to thank you. If there's nothing else, this meeting stands adjourned.
Absolutely.